Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Bailey Pod. We got an action-packed show tonight. Do not touch that dial. Stay tuned. We got an action-packed one. We have two of the hottest. I'm going to say it again. We got two of the hottest here tonight. Nick 10 coaches, Coach Casazza from Jefferson and Coach Capriotti from Guilford. These two are two upcoming coaches. And people, you do not want to miss the time here on the Bailey Pod with these two great coaches. Also, my Bailey Pod contributors tonight, Matt Trowbridge and Harold Bone with the Rockton-Roscoe News. Before we get into the show, you know what I usually do. On the Bailey Pod, we just like to get really comfortable. I like for my viewers to just go grab a snack, popcorn, preferably, if you like popcorn. If you don't have popcorn, a beverage of your choice, and then also to a snack of your choice. But guys, you know what time it is. It's really time. Again, it's really time to get in tune with the Bailey Pod because we got an action-packed one tonight. Let's go. Hey. Again, welcome to another great edition of the Bailey Pod. Before we start the show tonight, again, we got an action-packed one. So don't get up, go to the restroom, hold it if you have to. All right, we won't be long tonight, I promise you. But don't get up to go to the bathroom because we got an action-packed one tonight. Again, two great coaches from the Nick 10, two up-and-coming great coaches. Let me rephrase that: two up-and-coming great coaches here in the Nick 10. I think these guys are going to be around for a long time with their respective teams. Guys, before I get into the show, I always open the show by just giving thanks to you viewers that have gone out and watched and followed the Bailey Pod and subscribed. It definitely means a lot to me. As you keep coming, I'll keep coming. Again, a reminder, make sure you guys go follow, go like, and remember to click that bell in the bottom right-hand corner so you can be notified for all new hot content that we're going to bring you week in and week out. Again, I'll be highlighting sitting down with coaches. I'll be sitting down with players and just really diving into some deep discussion about game situation, games coming up for the week, big games. Some coaches may come on here that may have losses that week. I'm not going to always bring on coaches who win every week. Just not going to do that. I'm going to give everybody a fair shot. I'm a fair guy, and I'm going to stay that way. So we're going to go ahead and just continue to move through the show. Tonight, we're going to get into a few topics. Again, my two coaches here tonight. Again, Coach Capriotti from Guilford. He's got his Vikings playing right now at a really high clip. They're 2-1. And then another guest coach tonight, Coach Casazza over at Jefferson. He's got those Jayhawks really flying high. They're 2-1. They're off to a really great start. We're going to tune in, tap in with those coaches here shortly. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in my contributors here. And we're going to go ahead and get into our game of the week last week. What's happening, fellas?
Not much. Just here for the Bailey Pod.
You're enjoying the beautiful weather.
There you go. No golf this week, fellas. No golf this week.
Oh, golf every day. Golf and tennis every day almost.
Every day. Matt, you can do that, though. You're retired. So, you can do whatever you want to do. You paid your dues, man.
That's what I want to do.
Yes, you have paid your dues for sure.
Right. Guys, hey, I want to thank you again for joining the Bailey Pod here for our fourth week here on the show. Definitely means a lot when I can have two gentlemen of your caliber on here sharing your knowledge and your expertise as we talk about teams and we have conversation with coaches. Guys, I'm going to go ahead and get right into our game of the week. Last week was Hononegah, Harlem. I tell you guys what a dandy over there it was at Hononegah. Two great teams going head-to-head. Obviously, the outcome was a little sour for Hononegah, but, we're going to go ahead and get into our take. I do a take each and every week on the game of the week, and obviously this week is our game of the week was Hononegah over at Harlem. I know, Harold, you were over there as well as I was. Matt, I don't know if you got out to go see that game, but Harold, I'm going to go ahead and start off just with the Bailey Pod take. I thought, last week coming in, I thought, this was going to be a better matchup than what we actually saw on Friday night. I thought, as it relates to Harlem, I thought Harlem was, Harlem. They played well, fundamentally sound, playmakers on both sides of the ball, great coaching. They just have playmakers. I just thought that they really really came to play that night, and Hononegah didn't. Hononegah just really couldn't get anything going in the first half. They came out second half lethargic as well as they were in the first half, and they just really couldn't get that train going. So again, kudos to Harlem of going on the road into a very volatile and hostile environment as there is in Hononegah, and coming out with that big victory over Hononegah. Again, Hononegah's got a lot of things to fix, and we'll get into that in just a second. But, I think Harlem, what they can do here in the next, 5 or 6 weeks, nothing's guaranteed. But, if they can correct some things on offense, correct some things on defense, I think, we're going to be talking about Harlem, probably in week 8, week 9, in some form or fashion, in a good light, so to speak. So, again, that's my take from the game of the week, Hononegah, Harlem. Go ahead, Harold.
Tim, I'd follow up on that. I think the biggest thing for me in that game was Harlem came in extremely confident that from the opening whistle to the gun went off at the end of the game, they were super confident. I was extremely impressed with the way their offensive line was able to control the front seven for Hononegah. The last couple of years, Hononegah has been able to control the front, from an offense or from a defensive line perspective, and I thought Harlem dominated that part of the game. I just was so impressed with them. They harassed Shockley in the game, 8 of 15 with 2 interceptions, and he threw for just 79 yards. Now, that was a season debut, yes, but he was harassed throughout the game. He had to move around. He couldn't set his feet, and that all came down to the defensive line for Harlem. I was so impressed with them. Their linebackers, both of them did great as well. They cleaned up a lot of the stuff. They got through that first level, so I was extremely impressed with them. But like I said, the most impressive thing to me was the way they came out and with the confidence that they played. Last year, they were pretty soundly by Hononegah. This year, it's a different team. They're full of energy, full of skill. They got talent at every level of the offense and defense. They're going to be a tough team to knock out.
Right, I agree. Yeah, just a quick note here. As I look at some stats from that game, Harlem Hononegah, a notable one that really stood out to me was, first downs. Harlem 15, Hononegah 6. You would have thought, based on history of Hononegah's run game that they've had year in and year out for the last 2 decades, that they would have something equivalent or close to equivalent to what their opponent had in Harlem.
Yeah, Tim, one of the things I made note of, just in my brain as I was at the game, is the long second and third down situations in Hononegah put themselves in because they got behind the sticks early in that game. And then that allowed Harlem's defense to then ratchet up and use what they have, which is a ton of speed. They were able to run around and through the offensive line for Hononegah. They harassed the passer. They stopped the run game. Hononegah had just over 70 yards rushing in the game in total. They did everything right from a game plan perspective. I know Coach Morrow last week, he was very quiet, but he was very confident. You could tell he knew what he had. He knows he's got a good team, and he just let them go out there and just play their ball game.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, another stat. Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead, buddy.
I wasn't at the game, and I don't get stats anymore now as an old retired guy, but so Harold can correct me, or you can correct me if you want, but I had 2 takeaways from the game. One, as much as I think Harlem kind of controlled the game, it seems like 2 plays, and it could have been a real close game where wasn't Hononegah had 2-0, and then they had a touchdown called back, and if they'd get that touchdown, and Harlem doesn't get that 90-yard punt return by Jackson Cook, all of a sudden it's a 1-score game without those 2 things. And then my other takeaway is I think Hononegah has 7 interceptions already this year, maybe 8. And I mean, I can't remember a season when they had that many interceptions, and they've got that already.
Right. Yeah. You just thought that, this game probably would have been a little bit closer. Again, in my estimation, I don't think Hononegah is tough as they had been in the last couple of years. I think both of you guys can attest to that very honestly. They're just missing a lot of key pieces. And I said that on the show with Scott Leber on the overtime the other night. I just said that, Hononegah, they need playmakers. I just don't see the playmakers this year with Hononegah as they've had in the past. Would you guys agree with that, Harold?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I don't think they have a dynamic playmaker at any level, either a running back or a wide receiver. They have some guys that they can match up, but they're not going to go 50, 60, 70 yards. They'll be able to get you an 8, 10, 15-yard type play, but they're not going to get you that long distance home run play that really Hononegah over the last few years has been known for. No matter if it's from the quarterback position, moving around and getting out there like Warren did, or it's Isaiah, which is what he did, for a few seasons there. They just don't have anybody there. And that's what happens sometimes, with high school. You don't get to go out and recruit and do all the things that, you can at the other levels of football. And that's what happens. And Hononegah's playing the cards that they've been dealt. And, they're going to need to keep it close. They can't turn the ball over. They can't get behind the chains because they don't have the ability to kind of make those explosive plays. And Matt, I would agree with you as far as a couple of plays could have made the game closer, but being there, I never felt like Hononegah was ever in that football game. I just didn't get any feeling that at Kelsey Field that there was any feeling either from the fans or the action on the field that Hononegah felt like that they were in that football game. I know a player or two could have made it closer, but I'm just not sure that I'm just not confident they had the ability to beat Harlem this year. They just were a better football team, and sometimes that happens. And look, as we know, and Matt, as you pointed out a couple times, defensively, Harlem's one of the top 2 teams in the conference. That's why they're undefeated, right? And they didn't even really need to use their defensive backs all that much because the defensive line got so much pressure on Shockley that he didn't have time to even look down the field, even if he would look for a matchup. And we know that Harlem has the 2 best corners in the league, or at least the tandem is. So against the upper teams in the conference, Hononegah is really going to struggle to score points and move the football. Now, against the teams that are in the middle or, the lower half of the conference, I think they'll be fine. If they, protect the football, they play good defense, and they can move it and take advantage of some of the errors from their opponent. But I think against Harlem, I hate to say it, Guilford on Friday night, North, it just might be too much to overcome.
Well, guys, I mean, I don't mean to continue to repeat myself, but again, they just don't. It was night and day in terms of the playmakers on both sides of the ball. You saw some really good, phenomenal playmakers of Harlem, in Cook, the other young man, Broom, and then the other young man, McClellan, and then the quarterback, Fawcett. So, and you look at Harlem's offense and you say, okay, who really stood out? And I'm looking at a stat here. Banker, 13 carries, 45 yards, subpar night for him. You look at Shockley. He was their second leading rusher, 8 carries, 22 yards. So again, Hononegah's used to having that 1-2 punch in the backfield, but they don't have that this year. They just don't have. Last year they had Anderson and Smith. You got 2-headed monsters coming at you, and then you had the crazy legs of Kelly. So you had like 3 running backs. This year you really only have 1. And then you look at what they have on the perimeters. They can't stretch the field. We saw that Friday night against Harlem. Again, what they have up front, that's no question. They have great offensive linemen, but they just don't have the playmakers right now in those skill positions, I think, to be able to play with some of the upper echelon teams here in the Nick 10, my opinion.
Well, Tim, I think you hit it on your very first sentence. You said on both sides of the ball. Because it's not just that they don't have this explosive running back or receiver, but I don't think they have a player that really looks like, from when I saw them when they played against Auburn, make a huge difference. I mean, the 2006 Bears went to the Super Bowl with a kick returner who people forget how much Devin Hester fumbled, but he could break that. And their defense was full of playmakers, whether it was Urlacher or Lance Briggs or whatever. Now, when you're talking about Belvedere North, and you're talking about Roman and Bucher and all those guys are also playmakers on defense. Guilford, you've got Keeson Taylor and you got Messiah Tilson and Chris Porter. Well, those guys are also playmakers on defense. I think
And
that
Matt,
I think
just,
even Auburn's got a playmaker with
yeah,
Gavin Sanders.
right.
Freeport's got
And,
them with Epps and stuff. I mean,
and
you
Matt,
know, I
and
think
Matt,
Hononegah's got
and
a
Matt,
solid team.
and Matt, that's my point. They're missing those
Right.
caliber players, those players that you just mentioned. They could play for me any day. Okay.
Yeah.
Hands down, they can play for me any day. Those players that you just mentioned, Hononegah doesn't have that type of talent at the skill positions this year. Let's just go ahead and admit
Right.
it. I think everybody in that
Yeah.
stadium would agree. Some would disagree, and that's fine. That's your own opinion. But
Yeah.
what my eyes saw and
Well,
what I saw on Friday
yeah.
night and what I saw, a couple weeks ago when they played Auburn, they just don't have that type of unit this year. They just don't.
Right. Well, and I guess the point I was going to make is you can still win with solid players, with not exceptional players, but with solid players who all work together and fit together.
This is
And
true.
I've known the Hononegah program long enough. I think they're going to surprise somebody before the year goes out, but they're not. They're going to have to do almost everything right to beat a good team because they
Right.
don't have
And,
the difference makers they've had in the past.
and
So
guys,
it's they all got to work together and they all got to pull their weight.
and guys, let's just keep it real here. None of us are saying that Hononegah doesn't have a chance to win another game. Okay, let's get that clear.
Oh, no,
okay?
no. I mean, they got
somebody.
a chance
Well,
to
I'm just
beat
saying,
anybody in the
somebody's
conference.
gonna see this podcast and they're gonna go back and they're gonna twist it, and that's fine. Do what you do. But what we're saying is they just don't have those bevy of playmakers that they're accustomed to having year in and year out. We're speaking truth. And I'm pretty sure their coaches would agree. They don't have the Hueys. They don't have the Kellys. They don't have the Andersons and the Smiths. I don't see that this year. I just really don't see that this year. Again, what they have, they got great linemen. Harold, you just said it. You just alluded to it a second ago. They have great linemen. Hononegah's known to have great linemen each and every year. Over the last 4, 5, 6 years, they've had some really great skilled players, but this year they just don't have it.
Yeah, there's different levels to this, in Nick 10 play. Obviously, the top 3 teams in the conference now, I think we could confidently say North, Harlem, and probably Guilford. I mean, that's where it is. Not saying that Hononegah is not going to win another game, right, not have an opportunity to go to the playoffs. They're probably not going to compete for one of the top 2 spots in the conference. They're still a very good high school football team. They're just not where they have been over the last couple of years.
Harold, I'm gonna interject here for a second. You mentioned those teams that you said that that are still teams that are hot, teams that could they could compete with, and you can't forget Jefferson. The way Jefferson's playing right now, Jefferson, they're playing really good right now. They're a damn good football team. What they did 2 weeks ago against Boylan was nothing short of sensational. I thought Coach Casazze did a phenomenal job of just really getting his kids ready for that type of game and then coming out with a victory. They didn't win by a large margin, but here in this conference and any other conference, a W is a W. Okay. We can't forget about there are some teams out there that I think that are going to really make a really big push, guys, in the next 7 or 8 weeks. And I think one of those teams, I'll be honest with you, I'm not saying it because he's on our show tonight, but I think Jefferson can be that team that makes that really big push.
Well, they have definitely improved since the first game of the season, and they continue to get better all across the board. Quarterback obviously is playing better and understanding the system more. I think their lines are doing a lot better job,
right?
Stopping the run and protecting the passer. That's giving them an opportunity. Townsend's playing really well at the wideout spot. I mean, he might be the hottest wide receiver in the whole conference right now. So I'm not saying Jefferson is not good. So I should have included them in there. But, from preseason until now, Jefferson, I would say, is the most improved team. Hononegah is at about where we all thought.
Right. And again, we're not saying they're out. We're not saying they're out. We're just talking facts. They're just not that talently loaded this year as they had been in the past. Are they still a good team? Yeah, they're still a good team, but just missing some core pieces, guys. We're going to go ahead and move on. We're going to go bring in our first guest tonight. He's got his team, the Jefferson Jayhawks, playing at a really high clip. I like what they're doing. I like what he does offensively. I think he does some really great things schematically on offense. They got their defense really playing well. They're making big stops and just really coming out each and every week and showing that, as you just alluded to, Harold, that progression that they've been making every week to get better and better and better and start putting their names on the map in the Nig 10. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring in our first guest coach tonight, Jefferson Jayhawks coach Casazza. How you doing, Coach?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me
Good.
on, guys.
Good to have you, man. Good to have you, Coach. I want to thank you for joining the Bailey Pod tonight. Definitely means a lot to myself and my contributors as well. You have your team right now at 2-1. You come off a big victory a couple weeks ago. Boylan came to you guys. You knocked them off. Then you guys come out. I believe this past weekend you guys played. Is it Auburn? I believe.
No,
is that accurate?
We played Boylan this past week.
Boylan this past week. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep. And then you guys got that big victory over East in week 1, that 3-0 win. Coach, talk to us a little bit about, your progression week in and week out, what your game plan is, what your focus is with your guys. Because right now, I mean, you guys are one of the hot teams right now, in my estimation, in the conference. And I think there's a rhyme and reason for that. I know you guys have some good coaches over there. You mentioned that on the show that you guys you joined Scott Leber. He came out during his 2 days, and you talked about your coaches, giving credit to your coaches. Talk to us a little bit about how you get your Jefferson Jayhawks prepared week in and week out.
Yeah, it's it's not always easy. They're high school kids, and the easy thing is like you mentioned, I always give a lot of credit to my staff. I think I've got the best staff in the Nig 10. And I don't think it's close. That's not a shot at anybody else in our conference. It's just how highly I think of my staff, not only as football coaches, but their character as men. And that's just kind of, I think, been our progression with our kids in the 3 years I've been there. Is our goals and our focus has not changed. We've not compromised what our standards are. We've not let kids slip by, without accountability. And that's just kind of how we prepare our kids. Our kids know the expectation is the expectation for us. And it doesn't matter if we're 2-1, we're 0-3, we're 1-2. It does not matter, because our big picture is, the future and their futures as young men, in our community as a whole. And that's just really how we approach every week. Sure, we get into some schematical things, and try to prep our kids that way. And that I'm going to kind of keep in house with what we do. But really it's just the accountability in which we want to hold our kids in our program to. And it's a pride in Jefferson. I'm a former Jayhawk. A lot of my staff are former Jayhawks, and it really, that place just means something to us.
Sure.
We've not always had the most success when we've been there,
Right.
as players, but that doesn't change our love for the place and, our love for those kids there and what we want them to be able to achieve and attain there.
Right. Coach, also too, you're in your this is your 3rd season with the team as head coach. Talk to us a little bit about, I hate to go back in history, but I think a lot of viewers don't know your background. You were on the staff prior to becoming the head coach. When you were named the head coach, were you ready to take the job, or did you have to kind of warm up to actually taking that head coaching role over there at Jefferson?
So I was not on the staff previous. So my first role at Jefferson is as the head coach. The season before I took the head coaching role, I was the defensive coordinator at Rockford University. I was only there for 1 season. And then prior to that, I spent 8 years down in the Nashville suburbs coaching.
Gotcha. Okay. But
Hey,
when
Coach,
you, again,
I want to ask about,
go ahead, Matt.
I look not only where you are, but how you got there, and then just really impressed. But 3 years ago, you guys were only 2-7, but you were only a few points away from either 4 wins or 5. I forget. You had a couple games where you scored 40 points and still lost, and you had this, just about the best offense Jefferson had ever had. And then your quarterback gets hurt right before the start of the season. and you wind up losing 16 games in a row that year, and then the first 7 last year. How do you overcome that? And in the last year, even when you lost those first 7, again, you were just a couple points away. How do you keep kids to keep believing, and then to turn it around to the point where now you've won 4 out of the last 5, and you're doing it with defense now instead of offense?
Yeah, so that's one of those things I'm proud of. Yeah, Coach Arnold's last year, they went 2-7 and they scored a ton of points. And then going into my first season, actually 4 days before our opening kickoff to Hononegah, we lost our quarterback for the season with his car accident. And that was kind of my welcome to being a head coach moment for sure. Sebastian was a super special player and a fantastic kid, and I'm really just glad he's good and he's off playing college football right now for DuPage, and I'm really proud of him. But that just kind of goes back to how we get these kids to play every week and how we've continued to grow. Sometimes I talk about we're in year 3 right now, and it kind of feels like it's been 10 years to kind of get to year 3. And that's just because the amount of work I think it takes to be a head coach and to run in a program the way you want it to run is you've got to invest everything in it, because the kids that you serve, they deserve everything you have. It's a year-round process. They've got to see that they are the most important thing to you. Now, I'm a new father. I've got 16-month-old twins and my wife. Those 3 are the most important thing in my life. But right after that, it is my Jayhawks. I love those kids. I'm 100% invested in them all year long. And they know how much football fires me up. I am a football fanatic. My job in the school, yes, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, but to me, there's nothing more important in Jefferson High School than the football program. And that's how I run and operate it all year long. We end our season on a Friday. Our weight room off-season program starts on Monday. And we go 3 days a week all winter, and in the spring we go 5 days a week. And if you're not in another sport for Jefferson High School, you are expected to be there and have 90% attendance. And if you don't, you've got to earn your way back on the football team. Your spot's not guaranteed.
I like it. Coach,
Hey,
I know
you
talked about Coach, you talked about your numbers here a few weeks back, and you said, when you first came on, if I'm not mistaken, you only had, I think, 40 kids, or is that last year you had 40 kids? And then now I hear you're up to over 100 kids. Speak to us a little bit about how do you go from 40 to 100? I know some of those kids are transfers, and we'll get into that in just a moment, but you're injecting something right over there for your numbers to go from 40 to 100. I mean, it's just unheard of. Can you explain that to us, how you were able to get to that number?
Sure. Yeah. So my first season, I think our total roster freshman through varsity was 37. And it's really, this is a big credit to our administration, is they got 7 of my coaches are in the building. I think seven of them. So we've got a lot of coaches in the building, and, not only is football, something that I am direly passionate about all year long. Like, I don't look forward to off time. I'm always looking for a way to coach. That's how my other coaches are too. Right. And the kids get excited by that. If you're not excited about it, nothing's going, they're not going to be excited about it either. Right. If you don't like lifting weights and you're not going to set that example, they're not going to like lifting weights.
Right.
It's got to be important. And we emphasize that to the kids, and you might not like lifting weights right now, but you go there, you build some confidence, and you're going to start to like it, and you're going to like to compete. Our big thing is competing, and that's how I think our defense has started to improve. I call our defense, so I take that personally when our defense isn't playing well.
Sure.
So, we worked really hard on that this offseason about, we find ways to compete in everything. We end every weight room session with some sort of compete period, something to get them learning how to win throughout the offseason. That's the only way we're going to change it.
Can you talk a little bit about the attitude and the school spirit there? I mean, I'm impressed with what the girls basketball team and the boys basketball team are doing also. And I went there a couple times last year. I don't know how many different signing days you had at school. It was at least 5 or 6. boy, when I went there, the whole atrium, whatever you call it, whatever, it was just completely packed with people. And it seems like, people at the whole school want to celebrate the Jayhawks right now.
Yeah. So, and it just kind of goes back. It's a common theme for that. Our head girls basketball coach is an alumni, Tiffany Kent. She does a fantastic job with those girls. Her assistant coach is Crystal, Coach Bracious. They also do a great job, and they're both alumni as well. Basketball, LC Robinson, he's an alumni. And I think that speaks to something, especially at the high school level, especially in the Rockford public schools. There's got to be an additional love for it there. It's not always the easiest job. And I'll say something that I think a lot of people in our community get mixed up is we have some of the best kids in the entire world in that building. They are really fantastic kids. You guys talked about Mike Townsend a little bit ago. There is not a better kid I've ever coached as far as attitude and wanting to improve all off season. He wants to be on the jugs. He wants to watch film. He wants to know about what bracket coverage is. He wants to know, about wide receiver releases. He wants
to be a sponge.
He is a sponge, man. He's the most inquisitive kid I've ever met. And he has got $1 million smile. He never misses a day of school. He's the nicest kid you're ever going to meet. And we just got a building full of those kids. They just need somebody who wants to invest in them, what they're willing to invest in their future.
Sure.
Coach,
go ahead,
just
Harold.
kind of following up on the theme here. So anyone who's been around you for any period of time, they would say there's 3 things about you. First thing is your energy. You bring energy to anything that you do. I know I had the chance to run across a couple of the players during last winter, and I just asked them where they're at with the program. They couldn't have been more excited. They were heading up to the weight room, doing some lifting, and they talked and spoke highly of you. Is that part of your DNA, I guess, as a program? You want kids to be at the school and be involved in lifting, being involved in going to other sports, supporting those sports. Is that important to you in the football program's DNA?
Yeah. I'm really high energy, especially when it involves football. I like I said, besides my wife and my 2 kids, there's nothing more that I love more in this world than football. I mean, it's who I am as a football coach. I don't think I could ever live my life and be happy if I'm not coaching football. And those kids see that, and it's contagious. And yeah, I want them. They've got to be involved in another sport, or they have to be lifting weights. If you're going to be a part of our program, you just have to do it. And there's no way around it. If you're not going to lift, and you're not going to play basketball, or you're not going to run track, or you're not going to play baseball, you can't be a part of the program, because it's about building a community and building a culture. And it's just things that are going to translate to life past high school. And that's really our job.
Right, Coach. And you just alluded to something, just at the top of my head. I mean, those are some of the things that you do to build a program, powerhouse programs. That's what they do. It sounds like you guys are, trying to follow that model. And that, I always talk about how important it is for teams to develop that culture, because I think culture is contagious. And also too, the standard, talk to us a little bit about, how you're actually trying to come in and really change that standard. Because again, yes, you're an alumni, what it was like when you were playing there, what it's been like for the last 30 plus years. How are you now as a head coach over at Jefferson High School? How are you trying to put your stamp on actually changing that standard?
Sure. Culture and standard are words that, they get thrown around a lot, and they do mean something. For me, culture is, what are you doing every day? That's what your culture is. What are you going to accept? What are you going to tolerate? What are you trying to get the kids to tolerate? That's probably the biggest thing we did this offseason and last offseason is we have the kids hold each other accountable. And
right.
If they, one of our rules were in the offseason, if somebody's not wearing the correct attire, or somebody's not during our warm-ups, if they're not finishing the last 10 yards with a sprint, and they know what sprint qualifies as, or they don't clap for each warm-up, then the kids hold them accountable. And if they don't do it and we have to jump in and do it, then the captains are going to have they're going to have an accountability period too, because they got to learn to start holding each other accountable. And it's I don't miss work. I don't like taking days off. because the kids need to see me there. They need to see me excited about football every day. I don't pass my weight room off to another coach. I do have a strength and conditioning coach. I think he's the best in the area, Ryan Bracious. We would not be where we are without him. He is phenomenal. But I'm there every day too, because the kids have to see me. They have to know I'm not asking them to do anything. I'm not willing to be there myself. If I'm telling them they got to be there 90%, I'm going to be there 100%. I won't miss.
I like it. I like it. Coach, real quick before we let you loose here in a second, again, you're 2-1 right now. Looking here to Friday, you guys play Hononegah. Harlem. You guys play Harlem. Talk to us a little bit about preparation for Harlem this week. Has it been any different from the last 2 to 3 weeks, or is it maybe a couple notches up in terms of the intensity and the focal point in practice this week?
Sure. Yeah, it's a little different. Harlem is a really good football team this year. They got a lot of speed at their skill position players. Boylan, I think, had a really strong offensive line. I think that's probably their best position group. I think they were really good at that spot. Their defensive line was also really good. Now when we get into Harlem, Coach Morrow does a fantastic job. His teams are always really good, really well coached, super competitive. So it's a little different prepping for the speed that Harlem's going to have, and that's kind of something we emphasized. I think their young quarterback, he's really good. I think he's really talented. I think his arm talent is special. His ability to move around in the pocket's really good. So that's something we've kind of emphasized with our defensive line, which I think is, I think we've got the best defensive line in the conference. I think we got some studs up there. Some top-notch kids that we've tried to develop over the past 3 years, and they're playing their butts off. So, defensively, our philosophy is not going to change. We're going to pursue the football. We're going to gang tackle. We're going to finish with 9 to 11 hats at the ball, and we're just going to swarm. Now, our points of contact, our leverage, our edges we're going to set, they got to be a little different with the speed they're going to present. But we're going to go in there with the mentality that we're going to play with them, and we're going in to win the game.
Sure. Coach, real quick also, too, you got you picked up some transfers this fall. This fall. How important was it for you to get those kids acclimated with your system right away? And how much of an impact have they had on your season thus far?
Yeah. They've been fantastic. We got a couple of them from Boylan, from Lutheran. And the important thing about that is that they come from winning programs and they know what it takes to win. So when we're kind of preaching as a coaching staff, some staffs I was down at in Tennessee, we're quarterfinals, semifinals, competing at big levels down there where football is kind of big boy football. Some of my other coaches have been to quarterfinals. Joe Free, head coach at Dakota. So when we're preaching this stuff of what it takes to win and what winners do, they're able to kind of reaffirm in the locker room to those kids, yeah, they're not lying. This is what it takes to win. It's not easy. It's something you got to work for. And this is just what it takes. So that's probably the biggest thing they've provided for us, besides the fact that Jaden Williams is a fantastic kid. He's an electric quarterback. He's probably one of the best quarterbacks I've had as far as playing on time.
Sure.
Understanding a system. His footwork is fantastic. His arm is live, and he's just a great leader for our kids. So Jaden's really been fantastic. Julius Holt from Lutheran. He's probably the leader we really needed to replace a LaShawn Gathright. He's kind of one where he talks and everybody's just kind of,
right.
We got to listen.
That vocal leader. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've been great, and for me, the portal's something that's kind of weird for me. That's what people want to call it.
Right.
I'm never going to go out and look for kids outside of my school. If they're going to show up, I'm going to coach them like they deserve to be coached. But I'm invested in the kids that are invested in our program. And if they've, these kids that have been there for 3 years, Ant Hernandez, my middle linebacker, some people look at him, he's 5'7", 130 pounds. I think he's the best middle linebacker in the Nick 10 right now. He's playing great football, but he's also a kid we've developed for 3 years there. And I'm incredibly proud of him and proud of us for developing him and him putting in the work to get there. So I think our kids that we've had in the program are just as important as the kids we've gotten in as transfers.
Sure. Well, Coach, hey, we thank you, man, for joining the Bailey Pod tonight. Definitely means a lot to me. I'm sure it means a lot to my contributors as well, having a coach of your caliber on the show. Good luck the rest of the way. Good luck Friday night. Hopefully everybody stays healthy. You guys can make a good run these next 6 to 7 weeks. So, again, everybody, Coach Casazza from Jefferson High School. Appreciate it, Coach.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Coach,
Thanks,
thanks.
Coach.
Yeah, guys, I think he's going to go on and do some really good things. I think, he's with some of the other young coaches here in the area, I really had a chance to have some conversation maybe about a year or two ago with Coach Casazze, and just really what a really nice guy. He genuinely cares about his kids. He definitely wants to turn that program around. He's definitely a smart guy because he's surrounding himself. Again, I'll say this again very clearly. He's surrounding himself around really good guys, football guys, good guys, high character guys. And I think, what he's doing is he's going to be able to pass that type of energy on to his players. Again, he's an up and coming young coach. I think he's going to be around for quite some time if he continues to stay at the high school level and over there at Jefferson. I think he wants to actually be that coach to really turn that program around. And I believe in him. I like what he does. I think in due time, I think he's going to be able to put Jefferson back on that map.
Yeah, I would say that's what the leader of a football program looks like at the high school level. If you're gonna draw one on a board, I would say he's probably a good way to start that. He's got a great foundation set there. And if you guys have walked around Jefferson probably a few times, if you talk with any of their players, like in one-on-one situations, they speak so highly of him. And one of the things that he mentioned, and I'm glad he mentioned it, is that they see him around the school outside of his school hours and outside of practice times. And I think a lot of times, as we get older, we forget about how important that is to see the faces of our coaches around the school. Right. So it's great that he has 7 of his coaches that actually work within the school. I think that's a big advantage for him in Jefferson. That's a bonus. That they have that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a bonus. I agree. Again, I think he's going to do some really good things in his future as a head coach over there at Jayhawk land. So, guys, we're going to go ahead and continue to move forward, keep our foot on the gas, so to speak, here on the Bailey Pod. This next coach coming up, he's got his team playing really well right now over there at Guilford. They made the playoffs last year. Things didn't go as well in the playoffs as they would have liked. But this year he's got a lot of star power over there at Guilford. And I think, he's another coach I think we're going to be talking about for quite some time. And he's already injected that energy, so to speak, into the Guilford Vikings. And he's got them playing right now at a really good clip. Again, we're seeing a lot of youth at the head coaching levels here in the area. And again, I think we have some of the best young coaches in Northern Illinois, possibly even in Illinois. So I'm going to go ahead and bring our second guest in tonight. He's here from Guilford, the Guilford Vikings head coach, Coach Capriotti. How you doing, Coach?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me on. How are you?
Good. Anytime, man. Anytime. Hey, Coach, we're just going to dive right into it. You right now, you guys are sitting at 2-1. You've come off some really impressive victories over the last couple of weeks. You beat up on Auburn really good last week, and you get that big victory, Belvedere. You sour lost in your debut, 2025 debut over there at Belvedere North. Coach, I just want to talk to you a little bit about some of your star power that you guys have offensively and defensively, but how are you guys playing right now in your mind and the other coach's mind? And then, how important is it to you, for your kids to continue to stay mentally focused week in and week out so you guys can make that good run here in the next 6 to 7, 8 weeks?
Yeah. So first, to answer your first question, how are we playing right now? Honestly, we don't really look at stats. We don't look at the scoreboard. We're play by play. I know that's a super cliche answer, but against great teams, against elite teams, it's not really, one big result. It's a sequence of 120 battles, right? Or 120 mini games in between each snap. So last game we were able to really stay on schedule. We were able to open it up at every level of the field. And the way we stay hungry is our last game last year, we lost 45-3. We got our butt kicked by St. Rita. So part of it isn't just trying to win Nick 10 games. We know and we understand. And we lost to Batavia the 2 years before that in the playoffs. We got our butt kicked by Batavia. There's some big fish out there, and we want to measure up against them as well as our Nick 10 opponents.
Coach, again,
Coach.
you talked about, you just actually alluded to, you got your butt kicks by St. Rita last year. Was that a learning point process, so to speak, for you guys, like a learning curve to where, sometimes, the Nick 10 and the surrounding area, we have a knock on us. And the knock is basically, we get knocked out first round because we can't compete with the teams back east. I beg to differ. I think that's not always been the truth. I think we've had some teams that go over and compete and beat those teams back east, the Mark Carmels, the St. Ritas, the Wheaton Warrenville Souths, the Wheaton North programs. Was that a learning curve for your team, particularly the young men that came back this year? Did they learn from that?
Yeah, well, I could tell you, we didn't go in that game saying this is going to be a great learning experience, guys. We tried to go into that game and win the freaking game.
Sure.
And then the other thing we have going for us too, you want to talk about winners and one of the best in the area. We have Denny Diddick on our staff, who's won 2 state titles at Forreston, and we have Dan Apino on our staff. You want to talk about 2 guys that have been through it all and seen it all. We knew what we were getting into in a playoff game. Right. St. Rita beat us because they were better than us. Now, I would beg to differ that they're not 45-3 better than us. And there's a level when they have one-way guys the whole year and we have guys doing two-way things. There's some things that come down to it, but no excuses, full stop. It's nice to say that narrative that's, oh, yeah, we're learning and having, we'll be better next time. This is high school football. This is developing young men. This is about being accountable and playing relentlessly and fearlessly. And that's what we're striving to do every day.
Sure.
Hey, I want to stick up here a second for the Nick 10 too. And there is no harder path in the state playoffs than 6A and 7A when you run into the Chicago suburban teams and the Chicago private school teams. I mean, if you're down south in 1A, 2A, 3, whatever things you are, it's not 6A and 7A is it is just a gauntlet.
Powerhouse programs.
So
yes.
our teams go out in the
Agreed.
first round and our teams maybe even get beat soundly. It's not like they're that bad of a team, but they're running into the best of the best.
Yeah, I've been to 3 playoff games as Guilford coach. We lost to Cary Grove, St. Rita, and Batavia. Every year they got to the semifinals or the state championship. So, I mean, we could, at the same time though, as you're not, it's easy to say, oh, it's a learning experience, maybe next time, right? We want to get better from it.
Right. And coach, that's what I meant. What I meant was, did you guys learn from that game? What did you take away from getting your tails kicked the way that you did the last couple of years in the playoffs? There's always a learning point that we take away something from maybe a victory, maybe a loss. But in your case, what did you guys learn, about yourselves, losing to those caliber of teams in the playoffs? Yes, I know you want to go in and win. Everybody should play to win. I get that. But what did you learn, in terms of, did your team walk away saying, okay, we got to get in the weight room. Those guys were bigger, faster, stronger than us, or we have to, be better as a defensive unit. We have to be better as an offensive unit. What did you guys say as a staff after the game to one another and said, okay, this is what we need to do going forward?
I think the biggest thing
For sure you
everybody – oh, sorry about that. I
Go
think
ahead.
the biggest thing everybody took away was the difference between good and great is fighting harder for 2 more seconds. The difference between winning and losing comes down to just competing at a different tier. And oftentimes it doesn't pop up in stats. It's not necessarily running by someone and catching a big touchdown.
Right.
It's when your hands in the dirt and the trenches and you're firing off, instead of slipping off a block, you finish the block. Right? It's all those little things that add up over the course of a game. And I think, too, against really good teams, you don't have a play to figure it out. Right? You know, you've got to be on point, on assignment, on alignment, execute immediately. You give them an inch, they take a mile.
Right.
Coach, kind of stepping away from that just a little bit. You have a ton of talented players on your team. Messiah Tilson going to play at the highest level of college football in the SEC. You have a couple other folks that are going to play Division I ball as well. Are they also the leaders of your team in your program right now?
Absolutely. I think what's helping us trying to achieve a higher level is when we start our warm-up every day at 3:30, those guys, Messiah Tilson, Keeson Taylor, Ronan Bulfus, Malachi Richardson, Grayson Weber, Kevlin Jackson, Chris Porter, I could keep going on and on. I can name all my dudes. They're there holding everyone accountable in the lineup. And the way we do it at Guilford, you better be in the field house at 3:30, and we're going to warm up, condition, and then go lift before you practice. You got to earn the right to touch the grass. And those guys lead the way with that.
Sure.
Love the intensity, Coach, that you put out there.
Hey,
Sorry,
somebody's got to tell Harold, though, that we're in the Midwest. We don't admit that anybody's better than the Big Ten, especially after the last couple of years. Don't be saying that the SEC is better than the Big Ten.
Well, I watched the game last Saturday. That it didn't seem like it was real close. You know, I'll just leave it at that. The proof is in the pudding at some point. Like it's. I know they won the last 2 national championships, and we can go down that route, but like it just means a little more down there.
Coach Cap, again, you guys going against a really good team, one of the more better teams in our conference for the past 3 or 4 decades, Hononegah. They're coming off a big sour loss against Harlem last weekend. How are you guys preparing this week in terms of, understanding what Hononegah can actually bring to the table in terms of execution, game planning, playmaking? How are you guys planning to, come out and just actually put on a good offensive, defensive display and play all 4 quarters like Vikings do?
Well, I think the first thing is you got to really respect what Hononegah's done. I know the loss last week looked lopsided, but there's points in that game where a turnover here or a play here, and it's a lot tighter. And Harlem's a very talented team. So for them to compete at that high of a level says a lot about them. In terms of what we're going to do and how we're going to match it up, they're a great team. They're not far removed from winning 2 7A football games, being on the quarterfinals, then knocking on the verge of the semifinals. That's how I view them. That's how I'll always view them. They're the gold standard of the Nick 10. They have the best feeder program maybe in the northern part of Illinois. They come in ready to go. They run to the football. They hit the ball carrier. So what I told the kids tonight, what I told the young men tonight, was whatever Hononegah's best shot is, you're going to see it. They're not going to sit there and take that loss well. They're going to get back to their basics. They still are excellent in the trenches. They're still physical through the point of contact. They're going to give us our best shot. And where we're excited to see is how much we've improved from week 1. Can we take that shot? Can we deliver that shot and keep fighting and keep competing? That's what we're ready to do.
Yeah, I mean, again, 2-1 start, kind of where you guys were last year at this time. I believe you guys were 2-1. I mean, you don't want to look past Hononegah, but you guys have some other teams on your schedule that I think you guys will probably go to war with. I mean, I think all these teams that you guys have left to play, I think they're going to be really good games. Speak to me a little bit about, again, one of the coaches that we just had on earlier, he talked about, his culture over there and the expectation, in terms of your expectation over there, what are some of the things that you look for in your players as a head coach over there at Guilford?
Yeah. I watched Coach Casazza did a great job talking beforehand. I'm also an RU alum. Actually, when Cody was just getting to RU, I was graduating. And in terms of the standard and culture, I feel like teams only talk about culture when you're trying to find it. We always say we got to fix our culture, and I think it's really just comes down to accountability and effort. Be a man, be a grown-up, show up. If you make a mistake, own it. And as long as you're willing to get better, we're going to keep working with you. In terms of what the kids see every day with that, like I said, we're going to lift weights and condition every day before we practice. Full stop. If you aren't there for that, then you're not there for the grass. You're not there for the fun part. You got to earn the right to see that. What makes it go, as we alluded to earlier, was our best guys believe in that. Messiah Tilson, as a freshman, if anyone would have looked at him and said he was going to be an SEC player, I mean, he was a skinny 130-pound freshman kid who's lifted his way and kept his speed and got faster. That doesn't happen by accident. A lot of people like to think these D1 guys are just born different. They're born with some physical traits, but what separates them is how they develop those traits.
Agreed.
Messiah and Keeson, Grayson, Malachi, Ronan, Joe. I could keep. I'm sorry. I name one. I name them all. But what makes them what separates them is their willingness to get better where they need to.
Right. Yeah.
I want to interrupt real quick and say one of the things I've always loved about Coach Cap is how much he loves his players and his enthusiasm for his team. And you see it like he can never mention one player without put off about 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah.
Coach, real quick, a few more questions here. You have, what you guys have on offense. It's definitely nothing to sneeze at. I think you guys you have some of the best playmakers, I believe, in my estimation, in the conference. I want to talk a little bit about your quarterback, Weber. I know last year he was a sophomore, really did a good job of really just, keeping that team in games and winning some big games for you guys as well and getting you guys to the playoffs. How has he matured over the last year compared to, his sophomore year?
Yeah, and people forget that Grayson, by the end of his freshman year, was the varsity starter. So he went into his sophomore year with about six varsity starts, got 9 last year. So he's approaching 20 with playoffs. He's at 20 varsity starts. So the big thing with him is he's trusting his eyes. If it's there, he's aggressive and he's taking it. He's also not forcing the issue. He does a great job of if something's not there, he gets rid of it and we go to the next play. Yeah. The other thing too with Grayson is he'll end up being the school's valedictorian. Full stop. He's going to be an Ivy League. I think he could be an Ivy League quarterback. And I think he's going to go that far with it. And we trust him a lot with where the ball is going to go. And he's like a great point guard, man. He knows who to find.
Yeah, I'm impressed with what he's done, been able to do thus far. Just his last week's stats. I mean, just really, like you said, that point guard of that, that team, just really facilitating that offense and making sure that, point guard's job, one of the big jobs of point guard, if you know anything about basketball, don't turn the ball over. Distribute it, get the ball in the right people's hands, don't turn the ball over, and just be effective at that point guard position. And I think he's really done that. He's done a phenomenal job. It's some notable stats last week. He was 14 of 23, 143 in the air and 1 TD. I would have to say that's a good night in the office. I mean, Coach, can you share some thoughts with me on how pleased you were with his play last weekend?
Yeah, we had a few drops. He easily could have been around 300 yards passing. We had one that came back on holding, and we had a couple drops in there. One thing we're very we still got a lot of work to do. Don't get me wrong. But we have a lot. What we're happy with is we had one game where we threw for 300, one where we rushed for 300, and one game where we had about 150 in each. So the ability and the trust we have in our guys to take what's there and to make and to just execute that at a high level we're happy where that's trending.
Sure. Your ground game this year, Coach. I know, last year you had a 1-2 punch back there. You lost a kid to college, went off to college. A couple kids went off to play college ball. And just looking at, your run game right now, you got Porter has pretty much been your horse for the last 3 weeks. Speak to us a little bit about, how Porter's toughness is important to that Guilford offense because you feed him a lot. He carries the ball a lot. He had his stats were nothing to sneeze at last weekend either. 197 rushing, 16 carries, 4 TDs. I would have to consider this a really, really great night at the office. Coach, can you speak to that performance?
Yeah. So I think it goes back to understand what we're doing with Grayson, Kisan, Messiah, and Jordan Lopez and Ryan Maher on the edges. The defense can't sleep on that. So we make a huge emphasis of running vertically. And Chris did a fantastic job of getting north and south, taking what was there, getting downhill. When the defense has to pursue to each sideline and you could run vertically through the middle, there's going to be opportunities for some explosive runs. Chris is pound for pound maybe our strongest dude in the school. He's 160 pounds. He's benching almost 300 pounds. He's cleaning 200 or 250. He's over a 300-pound squatter. He's a freak, and he's loves football junkie, and for him to just attack north and south like he did, it's really the engine of what drives everything.
Coach, you have playmakers all over the field, but I just want to point some out. So I've had a chance to look at your last couple of games, and I made note of the fact that your offensive and defensive lines have seemed to be I don't know if you guys have challenged them or what you've done, but they have played a lot better in the last 2 games. And I think that's helped you run the ball for 300 yards and 150 yards and pass the ball. As you know, if you don't block, you can't run or throw. So can you speak to that a little bit? Did you challenge the kids? Did you move kids around? What do you think is kind of playing into that, playing better along the offensive and defensive line, more or less the offensive line, I guess I would say?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think against Belvedere North, we feel like we left a lot out there. And part of the reason, too, we didn't look so good against North is North's a very good football team, right? So we got to give them credit where credit's due. One thing no one really talks about with our offensive line is we average 307 across the board. So we're going to be a lot bigger and stronger than a lot of teams that we face. And I think it's just getting back to just firing out, believing in, attacking your gap and playing downhill. Football's at the end of the day, it's these big dudes versus these big dudes, right? And if we're drawing attention to the edges, there's no reason why you shouldn't play well on the inside. I would also argue every football coach in America is probably challenging their offensive line every week because of how important it is and the level of physicality that needs to be sent. Defensive line-wise, Keyshawn Taylor, we have setting the edge. We have a lot of returners on the other around him. Those guys do a great job playing upfield and playing low, hard, quick. I think it's just the heart and soul of every team is the trenches on both sides. And when those guys bring it, there's a whole new tier we can get to with our skilled guys on the outside.
Yeah. Hey, Coach, who's that? I don't know if he's 6'8", 6'9", 350, 360. Who's that offensive lineman you have that is so huge and like how old is he and how good could he wind up being?
Yeah, that's Malachi Richardson. He was a transfer from Rockford Lutheran. I think the sky's the limit for him. He's, I think once more eyes get on him, I think he'll be a Division I offensive tackle. I think he's that talented. He's that skilled. He hasn't played football a ton, but right now he's learned how to fire off the football and play with his hands inside. When you're that big and he's got natural athleticism to him, you end up moving people. And I think the more he just gets exposed to the game and jumping from Lutheran, which I believe was like 1 or 2A, 3A, 1A to 7A in an off season is a pretty big jump. And I think he's handled it really well.
How big is he exactly?
6'8", 355.
Wow. Big kid. Coach, I want to ask you about a player. He's last name Lopez.
Mm-hmm.
He caught some big balls for you guys against Belvedere North. How do you plan to utilize him going forward? Because again, I think he's a guy for you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's one of those guys that can stretch the field, as well as the other guys that you have complimenting him as well that can stretch the field. But I like the way how he stretched the field. I think he's become a really good receiver here in our league, and I like some of the things that he did in week 1 against Belvedere North. Speak to us a little bit about how important it is for you guys to get him more involved in your offense, if you haven't already.
Yeah, I think if Jordan was also Jordan Lopez was a starter for us last year, opposite. And just talk about another kid who's bought into the weight room. He's also a really good basketball player. He's going to play he's been on the basketball team and has made plays. I mean, he's 6'2", 6'3", and 170 pounds. And he's out there by himself, you know. The way I describe it to everybody on the offensive side is we do not care about your stats at all. We don't. When Kentucky came in to visit Messiah, when all these other schools came in to visit Messiah, and now they're talking to Keeson, not one college coach has asked us any about stats. So what we preach is, when your number's called, be ready. Because if you're not, somebody else is going to be ready.
Amen.
So I would love to say, well, we're going to try to get him this or this. If the defense dictates that he's open, then he's going to get the rock. And the one thing I love about all our guys, and Jordan in particular, is he's a superstar in his role. Last week, he caught a drag across the middle for a touchdown. Week 1, he was going over the top. He stock blocked on screens. We've thrown him a screen. He's, whatever we ask him to do, he's going to give maximum effort. But again, in terms of game plan, we're aware where our dudes are at. We try to put them in position where the defense has to naturally find them. But Hononegah's full of good coaches. The Nick 10's full of good coaches. They're not just going to sit there and say, let's not cover Keeson Taylor. You know what I mean? So what we like is we have enough depth that if teams want to try to take other people out, we can go to other spots.
Sure. Well, Coach, hey, I want to thank you for joining us tonight here on the Bailey Pod. It's definitely an honor having you on. Love to have you back here in the next 4 or 5, 6 weeks to talk a little bit more about, where you guys are. And then hopefully, we're talking some playoff football as well. But I like what you're doing over there. Very proud of you. A lot of things that you've done, your accomplishments, don't go unnoticed. I think you're a great head coach. I think you guys are on a good path over there at Guilford to really do some good things this year and the years to come. So, again, we want to thank you for coming out tonight and joining us here on the Bailey Pod. Everybody, Coach Capriotti of Guilford High School. Thanks, Coach. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. And real quick, Matt could congrats on retirement, my friend.
Oh, thanks so much, Coach.
Working with you, and when Guilford was down, you were always giving us the time of day and always respectful to me, and it didn't go unnoticed. So thank you for all the kind words over the years and always being objective, and congrats on retirement.
Well, thanks. That's funny. I was thinking earlier, I came in with, Bill Thumb and Vern Pottinger and Dan Apino, and then there was a second generation of coaches, and it's, kind of fun to go out with a third generation of coaches now coming that I've seen come in like you and Coach Casazza. That it's, I think people are going to have a lot of fun things to watch in the Nick 10 for years to come.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, and thank you guys for having me.
Hey, all right, Coach. Hey, good luck the rest of the way.
Thanks,
Stay
Coach.
healthy, and we'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one.
Appreciate you. Yeah, guys, I think Coach Cap's doing some really good things over there at Guilford. He's in his 5th season. I think he's a winning coach as of now, and I think again, as it relates to what I alluded to earlier about the young crop of coaches that we have here in the Nick 10, this wave of young coaches that we're seeing, it's really good because again, they're all quality coaches, which doesn't happen every day because some schools may not get a coach of their caliber of the 2 guys that we just had on. But I think Coach Cap, what he's done over there is over at Guilford is very special. I think he's got a really, really good program this year. I don't think anybody can refute that. But I think, he understands, what it takes to build a program. I mean, look at, the guys that he alluded to, that he has around him, Dan Apino, and Diddick, they're over there. So, again, what Apino did over at Boylan, what Diddick did I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, you probably know this better than I do, Forrest and what he did at Forrest. And, they've had some really Hall of Fame caliber of coaches that we see over there at Guilford. I think Coach Cap probably listens to those guys closely. He probably picks their brain. I think, again, goes back to what I alluded to earlier about, young coaches surrounding themselves around quality guys. And I think Coach Cap has really actually exhibited that over there at Guilford.
Yeah, I know we've mentioned this a few times in other podcasts, but I think the caliber of coaches and the caliber of men that are teaching young people in this conference, I'd be willing to put it up against anybody else in the state. Every time I have conversations here in person with these men, I'm just more proud to just be affiliated with them in a small way. They're such good men. They understand the scope of what high school sports is, what high school is, and how it breeds to a better life.
Right.
And what the life lessons are teaching. And they're both the coaches that we had on tonight, just great men guys. And great examples.
Great guys. And Harold, you mentioned this too. How Coach Casazze, you could tell he really genuinely cared about his players. I mean, we could say the same thing for Coach Cap. I think he genuinely cares about his players. He's a fair guy. He understands, what it takes to win. He wants to ingrain certain great qualities within these young kids, and these young kids now become young men, and hopefully they come back to their community of Rockford, and give back and serve, come back as servants and do the right thing and show the next crop of young men and young women that are coming up, how to actually lead. I think that's one thing we're missing here in our area. We just don't have enough leadership. And I think, what some of these coaches are doing, within the Nick 10 and just trying to actually build these young men up, get these young men in school, and hopefully these young men come back if they choose to. Some may not. But if they choose to come back, they come back and they become contributors, positive contributors here in our community here in Rockford.
Yeah, every time I look at Coach Capriotti, I think he looks exactly what the mascot is for Guilford, right? Doesn't he look like a Viking? I swear, every time I see him,
hey, Harold, Harold, let me pause for a second. He's a big guy. I'm just saying he's a big guy.
I understand that, but I feel like if they were going to make a statue of a Viking, he's a good start for that.
Right. No, he's a great guy. I've had ample conversations with him. I'm blessed and fortunate to be able to have, the relationships that I have with these coaches here in the Nick 10. They're all good guys, special guys to me. I give them all a hug when I see him or a handshake. So, but he's definitely one up and coming coach. I think that's going to be around for quite some time, and it's going to be interesting to see what Guilford can do, over these next 6 or 7, 8 weeks. Again, obviously, in the opening, he didn't like, getting their asses kicked over there at St. Rita last year, and as well as you shouldn't. But, I think, again, as I stated, I think they learned something from that. And I think it's important that, when teams make the playoffs and they, you may get embarrassed, but okay, what was the takeaway? What was that takeaway? Kind of like what Coach Morrow alluded to last week when we had him on the show. He talked about, the takeaway that they took away from that beatdown, pulverizing that they took from Chicago Mark Carmel last year. So there's always something to take away as a positive and a negative, in a win or a loss.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's probably changed over our lifespans is, now that, we're older, we understand that a loss, you can gain a lot from a loss. But, the fans who are sitting in the stands on Friday night, they might not think, hey, Guilford, they lost to Belvedere North, and it's one loss on the season, but really it's a bigger thing. They can go back and look at the film and they can figure out, hey, what can we do to get better? He talked about the offensive line improving, the defensive line improving. All of those things play into where you're at the end of the season. Obviously, you want to be better at the end of the season than you are at the beginning of the season. And Coach Capriotti, spoke of that so eloquently, how they took the loss in the playoffs last year and they gained something from it. Coach Morrow mentioned, and that I'll bet you every coach in the Nick 10 probably has a story similar to that. They understand.
Right.
And I think it's the new modern way to coach.
Yeah, for sure. Again, but again, guys, I think, going forward, I think these, particularly, Jefferson, I think Jefferson's, as Coach Casazza said, they play to win, and he wants to be able to, get that program, to that point to where, they're not taking those losses as they have taken in the last decade, 2 decades, so again, what he's doing over there at Jefferson and what Coach Cap is doing over there at Guilford, I think they both have the same goal, but just 2 different programs. They want to win. They want to groom young men. They want to change the culture. They want to make sure that the players are doing what they need to be doing during the during the off season, to be able to come out in the fall and give themselves a chance to actually compete on the gridiron.
Yeah, I know Jefferson's coach talked about the fact that, after they had their in the offseason, they had at the end of their weightlifting sessions, they had competitions. Just, it's the idea of competing. We're always competing. We're always competing to get better. We're always competing to win. It's not only Friday nights, but it's in the weight room. It's in the classroom. It's cheering for your fellow students at different events. Whatever it may be, compete. We want to compete. Because I think sometimes that gets lost in the idea of what sports is. Sure, it's winning and losing is great, but the idea of competing, training yourself to compete, as we all know, sometimes getting up and going to your job or to whatever you have to go through, you have to push through and you have to compete, and that's what the coaches are training them to do.
Yeah, I mean, if and you guys know this, but I'll just go ahead and voice this. But if you want to build a winning culture, you got to develop your players. You got to inject positivity into your program, in order for your players to want to even come out and play for you. I mean, Coach Casazza said earlier, 40 players, now 100 players. And he talked about how that came about. I mean, that's a success story right there. That's a slam dunk, and I think, with those types of programs that can continue to add numbers like that, kids excited, wanting to come out and wanting to play, because there were some years that, Jefferson only suited up, maybe 21, 22 guys, and, for them to have 100 kids in their program, that speaks volumes to the coaching staff.
Well, that's where the conference is so lucky. Like, Harold was making the point that these are all honorable men and very good coaches. I'll go back to best post-game speech I ever heard was Jeff Beck talking to his team after, I think maybe the refs took the game away from him the last minute of a playoff loss. And he was telling them that they were going to be a family forever, and he was always going to be with them and call them at any time. And I loved, one of my favorite stories was East coach Gary Griffin taking some of his star players down to the laundromat, and they would wash the team uniforms together on a night. But but anyway, it's we grew up, everybody was playing sports all the time. That's not that way anymore. You can't just open the doors and get 50 people out for your football team.
Right.
They got to want to play for you, and who wouldn't want to play for any of these guys? I mean, I love Coach Dedman at Freeport, and Coach Zimmerman, and Coach Cacciatore, and they're all just good coaches. I mean, Coach Donnelly out at Belvedere. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in the top of the Nick 10 or you're near the bottom. I mean, they've all got coaches that are really, I just think
genuine guys, Matt. I mean, they're genuine guys who, again, I mean, they genuinely care about their kids. And I think that's why, their kids want to play for them. No one wants to go play for a school just to get a uniform or get a helmet. I mean, they want to go play for a particular coach, and there's a rhyme and a reason why they want to play for that coach, and it speaks volumes to all of our coaches in the Nick 10. I mean, you got some coaches, in the Big Northern too, that we can sit up here and talk about. But, I think what we're seeing here in the Nick 10, we're seeing really quality, genuine men who care about young men.
Yeah. And that's why
genuinely care about young men.
And that's why I think everybody should be on a sports team. I have 4 daughters. My one rule in the house was everybody had to play at least one varsity sport, but everybody should be part of a team in life. And I don't mean, some little league team or 6-year-old soccer team. You play on a high school sports team, you learn something. I mean, it's a different experience. You learn what it is to be like a teammate and to have teammates and to have a coach where you've got to do what they say, whether you want to do it or not. And I mean, being a teammate is a really, really important life experience.
Absolutely. Agreed for sure. Guys, I want to real quick before we head out of here tonight, just want to go over my Bailey Pod top performers of the week this week. We had some really, really top performances this week out there on the gridiron here in the Nick 10. First, I'm going to start off with Weber. Weber over there at Guilford. What a night he had. Again, 14 of 23, 143 in the air and 1 TD. Fawcett, that Fawcett young man, he's been hot the last few weeks. He's going to continue. It's going to be interesting to see how he continues to evolve over the weeks. He was 9 of 14, 98 yards and 1 TD in their big victory over there at Hononegah. You got Cook. Cook did a phenomenal job. He only caught 1 ball, but he did a phenomenal job, just on special teams. Eventually, teams are going to figure out we don't kick to cook, if that makes sense. We don't kick to cook. That's the kid you do not want to kick to. And then McClellan had a really great night. He had a big grab in the east end zone up there at Hononegah last week. He had 5 catches, 52 yards in that big TD grab that he had to give Harlem that great 2-1 start that they are on right now. As we look at the schedules, well, actually, hold on. One kid I did forget, Porter, who we just mentioned with Coach Cap, 197 on the ground, 16 carries, 4 TDs. I mean, again, what a great night at the office for that young man. It's going to be interesting to see if he can keep that engine going as the weeks progress, because right now he's that premier back over there at Guilford. So it's going to be interesting to see him continuing to evolve week in and week out over there at Guilford. Guys,
and I think Harlem's got a 3-0 start. I think you said 2-1. I think
3-0. 3-0. Okay. All right. Yep, you're right. 3-0. 3-0 start. Harlem fans, I'm sorry for saying you guys are 2-1, 3-0. Don't want to get any hate mail. 3-0 start with the Huskies. Again, what they're doing over there, nothing short of phenomenal. Coach Morrow's doing a great job over there at Harlem. But again, guys, I just want to thank you for coming on tonight. Oh, before we go, Matt, I want to say thank you for coming on the shows of the Bailey Pod, being a contributor as you have been over the last year. It's been an honor to sit with you and pick your brain, so to speak, and you give your knowledge and your expertise. It's been great, man, and I want to thank you again for just coming on, man, and just being in your presence. It's been a really great treat over the last year.
Well, you and Harold are really fun to chat with, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, Matt, I appreciate everything you've done for the Bailey Pod here and for high school sports in Illinois, not only Rockford, but state of Illinois. And I have a message to pass along to you from the folks at Mactown, Atwood, and Ledges. They said they love you and come on and play around the golf anytime you want. I don't know what that means. Nice. I don't know if that means you get it comped, but that's what they told me to tell you. So, and great bunch of people are super supportive of you and hope to see you around on the course real soon.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I think our viewers want to. I hear the viewers wanting to give you something. Hold on, just a second.
There we go. I thought they were going to give me popcorn.
Hey, Matt, I don't mind sharing. Hey, I got plenty left. Hey, guys, I just want to say thanks again for joining us tonight on the Bailey Pod. We'll get back on the Bailey Pod next Thursday. We'll be back with great guests, coaches, players, and looking forward to next week. Again, get out, go support your teams. It means a lot when you get out and support your teams. These kids work hard during the off season to come out and get in front of their home crowd and just go display their talent. Again, you two, thank you again for joining me on the Bailey Pod tonight, and have a good night, gentlemen.
Take care.
Bye.
Nice to talk with you both.
You guys, thanks. Yeah, guys, there it is. Another Bailey Pod episode in the books. I want to thank everybody for joining the Bailey Pod tonight. Definitely means a lot to me. Remember, go follow, go like the Bailey Pod. I'll be bringing you the Bailey Pod every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Make sure you guys go follow, go like. Also, too, lastly, I know I talk about it every week. how important it is for teams to have their crowd behind them, their fans behind them. It means a lot to those young men out there on Friday night. So if you haven't gotten out to a high school game yet this year, make sure you guys get out before the end of the season or this weekend and go support those boys, those young men, because again, they do put a lot of work in during the during the off season, and they deserve some adulation from you fans. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and close tonight. Again, go follow, go like the Bailey Pod. Hopefully you guys got a full belly tonight watching the show. We'll bring it to you each and every week. So just remember, tune in and we'll be here. So again, have a good night.